Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dorothy here from the CCMA. You're all very welcome this morning. We're having a little technical hitch. Alison's camera doesn't seem to be working, but we will manage through because we can still go through the presentation. So you will hear Alison, but you won't see her this morning unless the glitch gets fixed while we're midway through. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my bad hair day, so apologies. Hope you're all well. As usual, we're going to give a couple of minutes for people to log in. We've had a great response to this webinar, and I know we only gave very short notice, so great to see so many people interested. We really want to make it as engaging as possible. So just while we're waiting for everybody to log in, and while Alison is just trying again on the technology front, can I ask people just to put in the chat box over to the chat box over to the right-hand side any challenges you're currently facing around employee engagement, and I can put them to Alison as we go along, and we can maybe delve in a little bit deeper, or also anything that you have been doing in your organizations that you think has helped with employee engagement, any new initiatives you put into play that you think might be of interest to others and others can learn from. We really want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you want to do that, please feel free, or obviously if you have any questions that you want to put up now at this point as well, put them up there now or as we go along. I know Alison is happy to take them as they go along. So what I'm going to do is we've a lot to cover in just 28 minutes now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Alison. As I say, you'll hear her, and obviously just to say hello to Niamh for anybody who hasn't been on the webinar before. Are supporting all of our webinars, so hi to Niamh. So myself and Niamh are going to go off camera, and Alison, we'll let you take it away if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Can you hear me okay?
Hear you perfectly.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, hi everybody. Apologies for not being able to see me, although it might not be a bad thing. Today we're going to talk about leading your virtual team. I did a couple of chats about how to manage your team in this new environment, and I thought it was a good time for us to look at staff engagement based on the CCMA benchmarking survey, which came out last month. Isn't that right, Dorothy?
Yeah, it came out in July, yeah.
Yeah, one of the big pieces that people wanted to have more information on was this whole area of how to keep your staff engaged and how to ensure that your teamwork had continued engagement. Now that we're into a situation where it's become business as usual, this virtual team. Okay, Niamh, you can move on a slide if you wouldn't mind. Great. So what we're going to talk about is staff engagement and what the impact of COVID-19 has been on staff engagement. We'll just have a little bit of a recap around what staff engagement is and a look at what has been happening across COVID based on some of the articles that have been coming out. Also have a look at what best practice looks like. And this is really around what best practice looks like now, because obviously we're in a different paradigm than we were 6 months ago. And we're also then going to look at two of the key drivers of engagement, which are trust and empowerment, and look at what they are and how you can build trust and empowerment to impact on your employee engagement or your people engagement. Along the way, I'll give you some practical tips, and also just to encourage any questions, please feel free to put any questions in the message box. I never know whether it's a message or a comment box, so I apologize.
Alison, I've actually just got a couple of observations just to put it in context. If you want, I can share them.
Yeah, well, please do.
Yeah, Maureen has mentioned, she says we have a virtual, and Maureen, let me know if it's okay to share your company. I know it's in the insurance sector. We have a virtual town hall with our head of, which is dynamic and works well as staff can ask questions directly. So I think I certainly know a number of companies are doing that, and that's great to hear it's working. Anthony has asked, hello, any suggestions on how to maintain a sense of team when you have a mix of some off-site and some on-site? So I know you'll probably come to that, Alison. And Sharon has just mentioned, not a challenge at the moment, but would like to know how to keep the teams engaged as a team, not individuals, going forward as we continue to work from home. And I think that's similar to Anthony's queries, how you keep that sense of team cohesion together. So I'm sure you're going to come to that as we go through.
Yeah, we will. I mean, it's one of the interesting points is that that's one of the pieces that comes out from both leaders and their people on both sides, which is that concern about keeping the team, keeping that social cohesion together. because in these times we're each going through our own stuff as well as working together. So I'll talk a little bit to that as well. Thanks, Dorothy.
No problem.
Niamh, keep going. One more. Okay. So listen, these are some, in my reading, some interesting points I think that I've come across. So as we're moving from this rapid response to a more medium to long-term recovery, we all need to get people on side, and strong staff engagement, team cohesion, and re-establishing trust will become even more critical to positively emerge out of this crisis. So this is the time for us. You know, we focused up until, I'm sure some of you are already doing a major focus on your people, but initially the focus was on getting the technology right, and then it was on getting the client-facing pieces right, and more now we have to really focus on, rather than the triage, if you want to take that emergency sort of department terminology, we're now more into the people of, you know, we're up in the ward, and we're probably looking to get to recovery phase. So how can we support and enable our staff at this stage to have more staff engagement? So let's look at a definition of staff engagement. Now there's a million different definitions out there, and a lot of them are very wordy. So I just thought that these two elements here were quite interesting. It's emotional and intellectual commitment to the organization. That's what staff engagement is, and that means that people are engaged. People are not just in their heads committed to an organization, but they're emotionally committed. They are connected, and that's where that connection, that team cohesion, connection with your leader, but also connection with your team is really important. And it also means that it's the amount of discretionary effort exhibited by employees in their job. This is an interesting one around staff engagement, because it's around, some people look at it as being what's over and above the normal, you know, day-to-day work. So it's how much effort people put in, and that's a real driver of engagement. Okay, but I think the important piece that I came to is that it's a two-way relationship. So it's not you engaging with your staff or your people, it's actually your people engaging with you as well, and it's also them engaging with each other. And that's extremely important in this time, because we can't engage face to face. So one of the tips that I'd have here is just take a bit of time to revisit your company or your team's last engagement results, and review where you are personally and what's changed for you over the last 6 months before you start jumping into what can I do for my people. You know, it's that old adage of put your seatbelt on first before you can help anyone else. So take a little bit of time to review. You know, you guys have engagement surveys, so review how, you know, your results for you and your team and for your company, and how you feel about them now, and get comfortable with the language, but also get comfortable with how you're feeling, both intellectually and emotionally, and where your engagement is at. Niamh, we can go to the next slide. Thanks very much. Now, pre-COVID, these were some, you know, there was a real piece around within staff engagement. We were looking at, and I'm sure a lot of you have already sort of seen this previously, maybe not in exactly the same format, but, you know, there were different drivers of engagement for different generations. Now, you could break them down as well into male and female, or level within a company, whether people are managers or not. But I think this is an interesting one, because it just reminds us that the drivers of engagement are different for different people, and generalizations don't necessarily help when you're talking about your team. So if you've got a small, a small team, it doesn't really actually matter what size your team is, but each person's drivers may be different. I guess that's what I'm trying to put here. But if we just look at what the main drivers were, I'm not going to go through them all, but, you know, there was a lot around, you know, there was not a lot, but there was pieces around for Generation Z. It was about autonomy, being clear about what their role was, financial security. Whereas for Generation X, it was more about work-life balance. These are people who, you know, are in the phase of probably bringing up children. It was about being recognized for their work. Maybe for Gen Y, it was about achievement, purpose, feedback. They're the strivers, they're building their careers. And for older people, it was seen as being valued for their experience. and flexible working. So there's a large range, and it doesn't mean that these things aren't important to everybody, but there was lots of different drivers. Niamh, if we could move.
Alison, can I come in there just to say, in the research, as you know, the average age of employees in the sector from the companies that took part in our research was 31. So you have that whole Gen Y is probably where a lot of people on this call might have the bulk of, or a large percentage of their staff numbers. But as companies are now, a lot of companies seem to be, you know, pushing out the reopening of their contact centres and are now saying, you know, it'll be next year, from ones I've been speaking to even just this week alone. So a lot of companies are going out and asking employees, you know, what their preference is. Do they want to come back to the office? So I presume they need to recognise that based on the age group, different people potentially, as well as other factors, obviously, will want different solutions to this whole this hybrid working solution or whatever.
Yeah, and I think the whole piece is a real driver in engagement is actually communication and feedback. So getting information and asking for feedback and asking what people want and listening to it. So don't just assume, obviously, that all the people who you have who have children want to work from home. Don't just assume that. It may actually be that they, you know, they could even have someone within their home looking after their children. So it doesn't work for them to work from home. It might work for them better to work from an office. And don't make an assumption that young people are all, oh, I want to work from home, because maybe they're living as one of my nieces is, living in a house with 6 other people, and there's only 4 bedrooms in the house, and there literally is no space for anyone for anyone to do anything other than work. Every room has someone working in it, and so it's very stressful actually, because they can't even take a break within their own environment. So absolutely, it's important to understand who your people are and what are the things that they need or want in this situation, and not to make assumptions. Some people love the social piece around being in the office, and some people they actually feel so much more efficient and productive being at home, and some people want a bit of both. So we did talk about this, and I did a webinar which you can go back and have a look at, which was about returning to work, about how it's important in whatever way we decide to return to work, listen to your people, and there is no one size fits all. So not only is there no one size fits all for every company, as in, you know, one company might decide, you know, we don't want to have any flexible working. Another company might decide we want all flexible working, but within those companies, realistically, there's no one size fits all. And so that idea that you dictate how people work is probably anathema to what I'm going to talk about later on around engagement, because that piece around not taking into account what people want and need is a real driver of disengagement. Does that answer your question, Dorothy?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. Thanks, Alison.
Okay, so within so what do we think the impact of COVID-19 has been on the drivers and engagement? Well, the things that are coming up, both they came up in some of your CCMA feedback, but they're also coming up, you know, I do coaching, and they come up on coaching calls on an individual level. But if we look at some of the, I'm sure you're all reading different pieces from different publications about, you know, what are the impact on COVID on people. And, you know, the basic thing is, not the basic thing, but one of the real drivers and reactions to and how people are feeling about COVID is this security and safety piece. So it's not something that we have really thought about in our workplaces, unless we work on a building site or, you know, maybe in a pharmaceutical firm. You know, this idea of physical safety has never really been in our, you know, in our head, the idea that we need to be physically safe and we need to take precautions, etc. It's just it's not really been a consideration. And for most of us, the idea of physically where we work hasn't either, because the reality is most of us worked from our offices most of the time. While people did have flexible working, the reality was that the most common flexible working was less than 1 day a week. So things have really changed around that whole piece around security, both the physical security around where we work and how we can physically work together. There's also the emotional security. You know, when everything's changing, it can be really hard emotionally for all of us. And I'm sure don't want to, say the obvious, but I'm sure all of us have had, those mad COVID dreams and waking up in the middle of the night and, with existential dread. Not all the time, but now and again, we're human. And so this idea at the moment where it's difficult for us to know what's going to happen in the future, it causes anxiety. And then the financial security piece, whether or not you're working full time, or whether you're within an organization that you're busier and financially it's doing really well, or you're in an organization where you might be busier but financially you're not doing very well. The reality is we are all worried about what's going to happen in the future, not just for us, but for our families and for our friends and for our communities. So these are, again, okay, we probably have all had worries of financial worries in the past, but now it's bigger. It's on the newspapers. It's in the media, and we're all talking about it all the time. So that the idea of security and safety, which, if any of you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, within that theory, it says that you have to deal with the basic security and safety issues before you can start to talk about more highfalutin issues like productivity, efficiency, engagement, cohesion. And the reality is that you won't be able to necessarily make everyone feel secure, and it won't be real if you do, because that's not the reality of being a leader. You can't make everything right for your team, because we're all in a scenario at the moment where we're not sure what's going to happen in the future, and that's okay. What you can make it is you can make them feel safe about the fact that they can talk about it, and you can make them feel safe around the fact that we're all in it together, which is what the government is doing. So the other pieces around it is trusting. This area of trusting relationships and social cohesion is really important as a key driver at the moment. And you're seeing lots of people talking about how, this piece around people working from home, we've trusted people to work from home. We didn't even trust them to work from home. The reality is they had to work from home. We asked them to work from home, and they did it. And in a lot of cases, based on the feedback and benchmarking surveys, they're more productive, and you see that these within your own teams, they're either more productive or about the same overall. I mean, some people are less productive. Obviously, it depends on lots of things like technology, but that in most cases, the reality is that trust, we have benefited from that trust so much, and we've trusted them to work from home, and they're doing it. And so we need to repay that trust, because trust is a two-way street. And then individual purpose around empowerment. This is an interesting one. So in a time when we can't control necessarily a lot, there are people who this piece around individual purpose, while it might seem a bit strange to some people, but some people, they're even more focused on individual purpose, because it's a piece around, I don't know what's happening with work, I don't know what's happening with my family, but I need to be in control of my life, and I need to understand where I'm going and what I'm doing with my life, and I need to ensure that I have a purpose, because I'm reevaluating everything in my life. So this piece around empowerment is important. So a tip here, does anyone have any questions around this? If you do, just put them in. So what I would suggest to you is gather your team, discuss engagement, send them the latest results, and ask them to identify what has changed for them and where they are now. So this is opening up that discussion. Niamh, can we move on to the next slide?
Alison, just a quick question for Maureen. So she earlier just suggested that, suggest regular team huddles, and then she's asking, would it be good to focus on circle of influence versus control?
Yeah, lovely idea. And this is around building trust. So, as your circle of influence is around, what you can. It's a really good thing to talk about at this time, because it's that piece around what you can and can't influence. So that if there's something within the workspace that, as a team, you as a team, or individuals within the team have influence over, well, then they can help to make change. But if they don't have influence over it, they can't. And so that piece is not necessarily around, building more and more influence. It's more around that piece around accepting what you can't change, and focusing on what you can. And So I would say absolutely, you know, focusing on what you could control. It's like it's focusing on, you don't have to control things in order to influence them, and you don't have to control things in order for the right outcome to come about. Because if you influence, then the right outcome can come about, but you didn't have to actually do it. So that's why that influence is so much more important than control. Although in crisis, a lot of people go to directive, I want to control. What I'd ask you as leaders to do is open your mind to the piece around, actually that's counterproductive. So if you tell people what to do, then the bottom line is, when you're not there, who's going to tell them what to do? And also, they might have wonderful ideas about what they should do in that situation, but if you tell them what to do, you're only using the wonderful ideas that are coming out of your brain, not out of everybody else's brains. So I think this slide is really just recapping that, you know, when we're looking at change, people, you know, are on a roller coaster where they can be pissed off about it, they can be angry, they can accept it, they can embrace it, but they go up and down this change depending on what's happening at any one time. And I'm just asking you to keep that in mind. Niamh, we can move on to the next one. And this is just for your benefit. You can look back at this and say, okay, so how do I help or enable people through change? And I went through this in my previous seminars. Can we go to the next slide, Niamh, please? Okay, so staff engagement. So recent studies are highlighting the drivers of engagement to tackle now. So the pieces to look at now are trust in relationships and empowerment for individual and teams. And I'll talk to you a little bit about how that, tips that you can do to build this, which will help you build that social cohesion, that feeling of being within the team. And in a crisis, communication of the above should be consistent, accurate, reliable, and credible. So we talk a lot about, you know, what's happening with our governments and, you know, the different stages of lockdown, both here in the UK and in the US. You know, consistency is so important. Being accurate is so important. Being reliable and credible is important. You don't have to be right. You just have to be credible, so that when you aren't right, that you admit that you're not right, and you start and you give the data and the information behind it. And if you look at what's happening around the communication around COVID, you can see how different countries are doing it differently. I'm not going to make any judgments on that. Okay, and there's some links in the thing to some interesting benchmarking surveys there, one from McKinsey and an article from PwC Ireland around engaging employees during turbulent times. Okay, Niamh, we can move on. I'm just conscious of time, guys, so I'm going to try and just ensure that you get some tips. So what is trust? Trust is a confident expectation. So that means that you're confident in expecting a reaction or behaviors from people around you. It's between team members, between leaders, between companies and their people, between companies and their clients. Okay, Niamh, we can move on. The elements of trust. How do you build trust? Well, by sharing, by doing what you say you'll do, by being open, by being honest, keeping others informed, being self-aware, being aware of how you're impacting others, and consistency. We talked about that a little bit earlier. There is a tip that I've been using lately. You need to get to know each other to build trust, and especially in teams where you've added new people over the last 6 months, but you know, in every team, it's important to have some get to know you time in your informal individual and team catch-ups. So if you're doing, and I think I'd encourage you to do not just team briefings or team meetings or huddles, I'd encourage you to do social informal catch-ups where it's catching up with someone and having a coffee with them virtually, or team catch-ups maybe on a Friday, having a drink together, and put in some get to know you questions. And that can be anything. I'm sure a lot of you have done this. You know, if in training, people always do it when they're doing training or workshops, to look at like things like, what's your proudest achievement, your, you know, it could be your favorite word, your favorite movie, and why. And it's about sharing and making connections with people. You know, when you meet new people, you tend to do a little bit of excavating, digging to find out where your commonalities lie. Well, this is something that, you know, happens naturally face to face, but it's something that you probably need to start off within your team, and then ask, you know, you could ask one of your team, okay, can you come up with some questions for the next time we do this? So it's about sharing and building that openness and making connections. Niamh, if we can go on to the next slide. So trust is important because it gives people more individual freedom. So when you feel trusted, you feel more able to make decisions, you feel more able to not to have to always go and ask for permissions. You have more choice. It's also about sharing control. So if you share control and decision making within your organization, then it's less stress for you, and it's actually less stress for the people around you, because it's very difficult, as you probably have all experienced, when you work for someone who's extremely controlling. You don't actually understand why the decisions are being made, and so you feel like you're working at the whim of someone else. So if you share control, there's less stress for both sides. The nature of your relationships may change and deepen if you're, again, it's about sharing, and it does increase individual empowerment, and it's a key driver of engagement. So I would say to you, make building trust part of your individual and team goals. So highlight, this is as a leader, highlight positive instances at your team meetings and ask for your team to do the same. You know, have you seen, you know, a good example of trust, building trust or trusting behaviors, or how trust helped individuals or the team in achieving something that week or that day? And you know, try and make it natural and authentic, but just keep it in your mind. Niamh, if we can go to the next slide. So let's look at empowerment now. So the definition, again, there's lots of different definitions, but here's one. Empowerment is the process of enabling or authorizing an individual to think, behave, take action, and control work and decision making in autonomous ways. So you're enabling people to do their work and to take control of their work. So in a time when we're not necessarily feeling in control of lots of different areas, it's great to allow people more control within their work environment. It's important to understand that control is not, or empowerment is not delegation. Because with delegation, you're giving them the problem and saying it's your, or the challenge or the opportunity, and you're saying, there you go, that's yours now. Whereas empowerment is you're enabling them, you're supporting them, you're helping them, and you're giving them the opportunity to also learn, and you're giving them some resources to do that as well. There's great potential among your team, and it can be really revealed through empowerment. The individuals, when they feel empowered, they feel a sense of self-efficacy, self-confidence, and self-esteem. And you look at people within your team who may not be showing that at the moment, and look at how you can empower them. Just notice. Because you're physically distant from your team, empowerment's important for you in order to be able to manage or lead. Next slide, please, Niamh. I'm just aware of, this is my last slide now, guys. I'm aware of the timeline. So empowerment in practice. So how can you actually practice empowerment? Well, allow more control, be a role model, and encourage. When you see behavior that is empowering, or behavior where people are taking responsibility and making decisions, point it out, as I said earlier on, and use social reinforcement and persuasion. So giving praise, giving verbal feedback. You know, it's really important to say things out loud, not just think them. And to say them out loud in a group is even more effective. And a part of empowerment is giving emotional support, and this can help reduce stress. And this is around being clearer around what you want people to do, about how they can get assistance. And helping employees achieve job mastery. That piece is really around identifying maybe training or coaching or mentoring opportunities with your team, individually and as a team. So with them, ask them what they need. So final tip is talk to each of your team members, ask them identify one action you could take and one action they could take to enable them to do their job more effectively. Make a pact and do this for 21 days and review. It doesn't have to be huge, but agree some action you can both take and review it in 21 days. And 21 days is because the research says that if you do something for 21 days, it starts to become a habit. So there's my tips and some ideas around staff engagement. I guess other pieces that I'd say to you is it's really continue to do the communication that you're already doing. We talked already about the virtual town halls, which can be really good. And I love the idea that you have real-time feedback and that people can ask and answer questions. And I think the important piece there is, you know, to encourage that, and maybe to encourage people to ask questions before the town hall, maybe put down some questions before the town hall and pass them on to whoever's doing the town hall, because that allows them to engage quite quickly and shows that they put preparation in, but also afterwards, you know, to encourage further discussion and communication afterwards. And to do that in as many meetings and training and catch-ups as you can. And to have those, I mean, I think we talked about it also in my first webinar here, all the different ways that you can communicate and meet with your team, from huddles to stand-ups to, well, which are probably the same thing, to project meeting, to, you know, encouraging people, subsets of the team to meet. Okay, so I'm aware now we're over time. So were there any questions, Dorothy?
No additional questions. I'll leave it open just for a second or two while we're just closing up. And thanks so much for that, Alison. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I think what I'd certainly take from it is, you know, and I'm conscious from talking to people in the last couple of weeks that companies in the beginning started the whole, you know, Friday afternoon catch-ups and all that. And people are probably getting a little bit, you know, it's a bit too organized in that respect now. And I think you need to keep changing what you're doing and mixing it up a bit to make it engaging. And obviously, you know, we're all going through phases of this, and you know, stats are going back up that are worrying people in the whole COVID area. So I think just be aware that everybody's humor and mood is probably changing from high to low, and you know, people getting a bit tired of everything and recognizing that they're probably not going to be back in the offices for a while. So I think companies need to plan their activities, but not always be assuming the same thing will work, that you need to change it a bit. And you do need to let people, you know, relax and have some social time. I was talking to somebody earlier and they were saying their company has brought in a no meetings Monday, so that people can just get the work done, because you know, the other side of this is that there's a lot of webinars and calls and conference calls in people's diaries, and for them to actually just get some headspace to actually do some work can also be a challenge. So I actually thought that was a really nice idea, no meeting Mondays, and that people can.
I think that's a really wonderful idea. But what I also think is really important is you gotta know what's going on with your people. So know who's on overload and who is actually in every single Zoom call, you know, and talk to that person about whether that's working for them.
Yeah.
You know? So that, because it's how these things impact individuals, and being too prescriptive, I totally agree, Dorothy, being too prescriptive about how we build team cohesion can actually have people literally screaming and walking away and going, do you know something? I don't want to talk to you at 5 on a Friday. I want to get my head ready for, you know, doing something, you know, with my family, or I want to, you know, I just want to forget about work, or I've had such a great week. I just want to talk to the people who we've just finished the project and they're the people I want to talk to. So I think you need to be flexible and respect what people require and what you require, and, you know, be compassionate as well, because as you say, people are tired. You know, a lot of people aren't on their holidays this year, or if they are, you know, it's raining or whatever it might be.
For sure. Yeah.
So, you know, it's important to remember the basics. Check in with people emotionally before you know, go all, hey, we're going to talk, you know, every morning for 10 minutes at 9 o'clock, and that person at 9 o'clock is literally delivering their children to creche or whatever it might be. So, you know, keep in mind flexibility, be open, and, you know, people are having a bad day. It's usually not about you if you're talking to them. It's usually something that's happening with them. So ask them. Okay.
Yeah. So just a couple of housekeeping things, and obviously a copy of your presentation will go up on the website. I'll put it up in the next half hour. So thanks for that, Alison, with all the links as well. I think they're really useful, some of those reports that you've suggested people have a look at. And a recording of the webinar will go up probably on Monday at this point. We've no webinar next week. I'm hoping to head to Galway and Kerry if we're allowed, given that I live in Kildare, but that's the plan. So we're taking a break from the CCMA webinar next week. We're back on the following week, and we actually have a really good webinar already. The details are up there with Log Me In, actually to talk about their own contact centre and how they've coped with obviously the surge in demand for their services arising from COVID. And so their own contact centre practitioner is going to just talk to us a little bit about that. Just as always, to remind people, it's awards season. I'm hoping as many companies as possible are going to participate. Certainly the feedback I'm getting from companies who are working on their entries is that it's actually created a really good buzz and brought through some positivity, has also enabled them to put project teams together, that people are working virtually on their submissions, and it's just, you know, giving some people something to look forward to. And we will be having an awards ceremony at this point in time. We're still finalising details, but certainly Burlington is booked, and if it can't be a live one, it will certainly be a one that will involve people on the night as much as we physically and possibly can. And also just to remind you, the survey's there. So anybody on the call that hasn't got a copy of the survey and would like a copy, just drop me an email. Happy to share that with you as well. And again, if you have any questions about the awards, happy to share that with you too. So Alison, thanks as always. Sorry we didn't get to see you today.
Yeah. Apologies, everybody. I think my computer is too security aware, so I apologize that we couldn't get that working.
No problem at all. And thank you so much. And thanks as always to Niamh, and hope everybody has a lovely weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.